Cheers to family. Just because you pay the bills doesn't mean you're one of us. My sister-in-law Celeste declared at Christmas dinner, raising her glass as everyone laughed. Then I froze, my 7-year-old son Oliver watching every cruel word. I snapped, my legal mind already calculating the perfect revenge that would leave them all devastated. I sat at the elegantly decorated dining table, my hands trembling slightly as I watched the crystal glasses catch the warm glow of the chandelier. The expensive wine I'd purchased sparkled in everyone's cups, and the premium turkey I'd paid for sat golden at the center of the table. Oliver sat beside me, his small hand reaching for mine, sensing the tension in the air. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, snow fell gently outside the mansion whose mortgage I'd been covering for 3 years. Celeste stood up gracefully, her designer dress shimmering under the lights. "Let's make a toast," she announced with that practiced smile she used for her Instagram videos. I looked at her expectantly. "Of course, what are we toasting to?" She raised her glass higher, her voice carrying clearly across the room. "To family. The real family. Just because someone pays the bills doesn't mean they automatically get a seat at our table." The room erupted in laughter. Theodora, my mother-in-law, clinked her glass approvingly. Frederick, my father-in-law, chuckled and nodded. Even the cousins who'd driven up from Connecticut were smirking into their wine. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Celeste, what are you saying?" She didn't answer directly, just smiled that cold, calculated smile. "You know what? I think next year we should celebrate without you. Just the real family." "That's actually a great idea," Theodora chimed in, her voice sweet but her eyes ice cold. "We've been thinking the same thing, haven't we, Frederick?" Frederick cleared his throat uncomfortably but nodded. "Well, it might be simpler." I stared at them all in disbelief. Then I heard Oliver's small voice beside me. "Mama, why are they being mean to you?" Celeste laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Oh sweetheart, we're not being mean. We're just being honest. Your mama thinks that throwing money around makes her part of our family, but that's not how it works." The words hit me like a physical blow. My throat tightened, and for a moment I couldn't speak. Then I heard more laughter, the gentle clink of glasses, the warm murmur of conversation continuing as if nothing had happened. I pushed back my chair and stood up slowly. "I see. Don't take it personally, Vivian," Celeste said with mock sympathy. "It's just that some people need to understand their place. You married into this family, but that doesn't mean you belong." That's when Oliver stood up too, his little face flushed with anger and confusion. What he did next would change everything. My breath came fast and sharp, creating small clouds in the cold evening air. I stood in the driveway, staring at the house I'd been supporting for years. After my husband died in that car accident 18 months ago, I'd stepped in to help his family through their grief. I'd covered the mortgage payments, handled the property taxes, even paid for the elaborate renovations Celeste insisted she needed for her content creation space. And now they were casting me out like I was some unwelcome stranger. I hadn't always been treated like an outsider. In the beginning, right after the funeral, they'd clung to me desperately. When Frederick lost his job at the bank 6 months after his son's death, it was my law firm salary that kept their lifestyle intact. When Theodora needed that expensive cosmetic surgery she claimed was medically necessary, they'd used my credit cards. Celeste, struggling to launch her influencer career with her pathetic follower count, had leaned on me for everything from rent to designer clothes for her photos. And I'd never complained. That's what family does, right? They support each other through difficult times. And I was exceptionally good at providing support. I'd built my career from nothing, working my way through Harvard Law School with scholarships and part-time jobs. They called it privilege. I called it studying until 3 a.m., living on coffee and determination, and sacrificing my 20s to build something meaningful. But none of that mattered to them. I was just the convenient solution to their financial problems. "Vivian, darling, could you help with the utilities this month?" "Viv, Celeste needs new equipment for her videos. Could you cover it?" "Sweetheart, Frederick's really struggling. Could you handle the mortgage again?" Helping occasionally had turned into supporting them entirely. I'd become their silent benefactor. No one acknowledged my contributions until they needed something else. I remember the first time it felt truly wrong. It was Oliver's 6th birthday last year. I'd paid for everything: the elaborate party venue, the entertainment, even the expensive cake from that boutique bakery Celeste insisted was Instagram-worthy. But when it was time for the family photos, Theodora had gently pushed me aside. "Vivian, dear," she'd said with that patronizing smile, "could you take the pictures? We want just the blood family in this shot." I'd forced a laugh, telling myself it was just a misunderstanding. But after that, the subtle slights kept accumulating. Celeste got a brand new BMW for her birthday, paid for with the money I've been sending them. When I mentioned that Oliver could use some new clothes for school, Theodora had laughed dismissively and said, "Oh Vivian, you lawyers make so much money. You don't need our help." That phrase, "you don't need our help," really meant they expected me to handle everything while receiving nothing in return. I told myself it was temporary grief, that they were still processing their loss. I was the widow, I was supposed to be strong and understanding. But then the whispered comments started, the casual cruelties that cut deeper than they realized. "She acts like paying bills makes her family. She throws money around, but what else does she really contribute?" And the most devastating words had come from Theodora just last month, delivered with that false sweetness. "Celeste has such natural talent. If only you could be more supportive of her dreams instead of always focusing on practical things." Supportive? I'd paid off Celeste's credit card debt twice. I'd covered her rent when she quit her retail job to pursue influencing full-time. I'd even hired a professional photographer to help build her portfolio. But when I gently suggested she might consider a part-time job for stability, Theodora's voice had turned icy. "Vivian, family means sacrificing for each other's dreams. We've always been there for you and Oliver." "Been there for us?" I remembered Oliver's first day of school after his father died. I'd stood alone at the pickup, watching other families together while mine was nowhere to be found. I remembered paying Frederick's medical bills when he had chest pains, only to discover later through social media that he'd fully recovered and never bothered to tell me. I remembered canceling my law firm's partner retreat because Celeste had called in tears, claiming she needed emergency funds for some fabricated crisis. But something inside me snapped that Christmas night while I sat at that dinner table, watching my son's face as they humiliated me. They didn't treat me like family. I was just their checkbook. I thought about how I'd paid for Celeste's luxury apartment renovation last summer when she claimed she needed a proper studio space. I remembered how I'd quietly transferred $5,000 into Theodora's account just to cover her spa retreat. And I remembered Celeste's birthday party, the one I'd entirely funded. I saw Theodora embrace her and say, "We're so proud of your success, darling." Proud of what? That she was good at spending my money? But I didn't see the full truth until I heard Celeste's voice that night. "Just because you pay the bills doesn't mean you're one of us." I sat in my penthouse living room, Oliver sleeping peacefully in his bedroom down the hall. The city lights twinkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, and my phone kept lighting up with notifications. My legal training kicked in. I was already mentally cataloging every financial transaction, every legal vulnerability. "Theodora, Vivian, it's Christmas. Don't be dramatic. Celeste, stop overreacting. We need to talk. Frederick, your mother-in-law is devastated. Call her immediately." But the messages were always the same: no apology, no acknowledgement, no respect, just more demands disguised as family obligation. I leaned back against the leather sofa and stared at the ceiling. How many years had I enabled this? How many times had I rescued them while remaining invisible? I was never included in their real family moments. I was the silent benefactor keeping their lifestyle afloat. I opened my laptop with steady hands. My legal mind was crystal clear now. I accessed my banking portal and began methodically reviewing every automatic payment, every shared account, every financial connection. The mortgage payment on their house, cancelled. The joint emergency account I'd established, closed. The credit cards I'd co-signed for Celeste, suspended. Every click felt like severing a chain. And I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel regret. I felt the cold satisfaction of legal precision. The next morning, I made a series of calls. First, my bank to stop all automated transfers. Then my accountant to review the tax implications of my years of gifts. I canceled Theodora's premium health insurance policy, the one I'd been paying. I terminated Frederick's country club membership fees. Then I called my real estate attorney. My voice was professionally calm, I need to begin eviction proceedings on the Connecticut property. The lease agreement has been violated. I didn't send explanatory texts. I didn't justify my decisions. I simply executed them with legal efficiency. I made fresh coffee and reviewed case files while snow accumulated on my terrace. My phone rang incessantly. I let every call go to voicemail. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt something powerful in my chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was control. It was justice. By evening, my phone had exploded with desperate messages. Theodora, Frederick, Celeste, even distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years, they were all calling, probably panicking about their sudden financial reality. But I didn't answer. I didn't even check the caller ID. By the next morning, I had 73 missed calls, and I felt absolutely serene. Less than 12 hours later, everything imploded. The first call I accepted was from Theodora. Her voice was shrill with panic. "Vivian, what have you done?" The mortgage company called. "The cards aren't working. Did you actually cancel everything?" "Yes," I replied with lawyer-like composure. I didn't sound emotional, just professionally detached. "You can't do this to us," she shrieked. "Celeste needs her apartment. We need the house payments. You're destroying everything." "I'm simply withdrawing my financial support." She fell silent for a moment. I could practically hear her processing the implications. I imagined her standing in her designer kitchen, the one I'd paid to renovate, finally understanding the precariousness of her situation. "Vivian," she said carefully, her voice turning manipulative, "you're being incredibly vindictive." "Vindictive?" I laughed dryly. Was it vindictive when I covered Frederick's gambling debts last year? When I paid for your cosmetic procedures? When I funded Celeste's entire lifestyle while she pretended to be self-sufficient? Her tone hardened, the pretense dropping completely. "You don't get to throw our private matters in our faces. Those were family obligations." I stood at my office window, looking out at the city skyline. "Family obligations work both ways, Theodora. When was the last time any of you supported me? You don't understand how difficult things are for Celeste. Not everyone has your advantages," she snapped defensively. "Advantages?" My voice sharpened. "You mean working 80-hour weeks while she posts selfies? Building a career while you all treated me like a walking ATM? Don't be so dramatic," she hissed, her voice cold and cutting. "Family means making sacrifices." "Then you start sacrificing," I said icily. "Sell Frederick's vintage car collection. Cancel your European vacation. Tell Celeste to get an actual job instead of playing dress-up for Instagram." There was a long pause, then a sharp intake of breath. "I don't recognize you anymore, Vivian. You're being absolutely heartless." "No, Theodora," I said with quiet finality. "I'm finally thinking clearly." I ended the call without another word. The next call came from Celeste. Her voice was higher pitched than usual, barely controlled panic bleeding through. "Viv, what's your problem? Theodora's crying, Frederick's having chest pains. You seriously just cut us off like that?" "Actually, yes. You said I wasn't family. I'm simply accepting that reality." "We didn't mean it literally," she said frantically. "You can't just abandon us. We're connected." "No," I said flatly. "We're not. Not anymore." "Wait, you're actually serious?" Her voice cracked with disbelief, but the underlying selfishness was unmistakable. "You're destroying our lives over some stupid dinner comment? You think this is about one comment?" I laughed coldly. "You mean the 3 years of financial support? The credit cards I guaranteed? The lifestyle I funded while you mocked me behind my back? You're such a..." "No, Celeste. I'm not confused anymore. I finally understand my role in your life. I was never your sister-in-law. I was your personal bank account. But that arrangement is now terminated." "You're being totally unreasonable," she said, desperation making her voice shrill. "You're seriously going to ruin our Christmas over this?" I smiled coldly at the irony. "Did you invite me to Christmas? Or was I just expected to fund it while being excluded?" "I can't believe you're doing this," she screamed. "You don't need to believe it," I said simply. "You just need to accept it. I'm done." Then the group text arrived. It felt like a desperate final gambit. Theodora, emergency family meeting. Everyone come to the house immediately. At first, I considered ignoring it. I thought about staying in my peaceful penthouse, letting them panic without my intervention. But something cold and calculating had crystallized inside me. I needed to see this through. I grabbed my coat, kissed sleeping Oliver's forehead, and drove to Connecticut. The mansion looked like a luxury magazine spread, sparkling lights cascading down the facade, elaborate wreaths on every window, expensive decorations that screamed wealth and status. I didn't bother with the doorbell. I used my key and walked straight in. They were all assembled in the formal living room. Theodora looked haggard, her usually perfect makeup streaked with tears. Frederick paced anxiously by the marble fireplace, his hands clenched behind his back. Celeste slouched dramatically on the Italian leather sofa, frantically typing on her phone, probably trying to maintain her social media facade. Then Theodora rushed toward me, her eyes red and desperate. "Vivian, this madness has gone far enough. We're family. Families don't abandon each other like this." "You already abandoned me," I said calmly. The room fell completely silent. Theodora stopped mid-stride, shocked. Frederick froze in place. Even Celeste looked up from her phone, mouth agape. "You abandoned me when you humiliated me at dinner. When you mocked me behind my back. When you reduced me to nothing more than a payment service." "That's not accurate," Theodora stammered. "You're my daughter-in-law. Your family." "Really?" I stepped closer, my voice steady but sharp. "Where was that family loyalty when you needed mortgage payments? Property taxes? Medical bills? I was there financially every single time. But at Christmas dinner, I was publicly degraded like I was worthless." "You're misunderstanding the situation," Frederick mumbled, avoiding eye contact. "Then explain it to me," I challenged. He glanced nervously at Theodora, then Celeste. No one spoke. "Exactly," I said, turning toward the door. "Wait." Theodora called out, her voice cracking with desperation. "You can't leave. We're family. Family members support each other." "Then start supporting yourselves," I replied coldly, "because my support ends now." Celeste leapt to her feet, her face flushed with indignation. "So you're just going to run back to your fancy penthouse with all your money? Leave us to suffer while you live in luxury?" I smiled icily at her. "You're 28 years old and you've never held a real job. You're not suffering, you're parasitic." "That's enough," Frederick bellowed, his voice echoing through the high-ceilinged room. "Vivian," he continued more softly, "we can resolve this. Just resume the payments. Support us like you always have." Theodora's face contorted with anguish, her voice trembling. "Vivian, please. We're your family. We love you." I looked at her, then at Frederick standing there in his expensive suit, and at Celeste who glared with pure entitled rage. I felt nothing, just crystal clear legal logic. "Love?" I said quietly. "You loved my bank account. I was never cherished as family, just exploited as a convenient resource." Then I turned around, walked out, and left them standing in their opulent, mortgage-free home, the home I'd been paying for. The December air was sharp against my face, but it felt refreshing. It felt like liberation. My phone immediately started buzzing, but I didn't answer. I let it ring into silence. The highway stretched ahead of me, clear and promising. The calls never stopped. Texts, voicemails, emails flooding in like a digital avalanche. But I didn't check any of them. Theodora's messages quickly escalated from manipulation to outright threats. "Vivian, please. We're family. How could you destroy us like this? Frederick's having panic attacks from the stress. Is this what you wanted, to kill your father-in-law?" Celeste's messages were briefer but equally venomous. "Seriously? You just abandoned us? You've ruined everything. Do you even comprehend what you've done to our lives?" But everything exploded 5 days later when they appeared at my penthouse building. Theodora looked haggard, her designer clothes wrinkled, her usual perfect composure completely shattered. Frederick stood behind her, rigid and furious, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "We need to discuss this situation," Theodora announced imperiously, attempting to push past the doorman. I stood in my doorway, completely blocking her path. "No, we don't." "What do you mean we don't? Frederick snarled, his voice low and menacing. You've destroyed our entire existence. Cancelled everything, stopped all payments, have you lost your mind? I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed professionally. You think I'm mentally unstable just because I finally established boundaries? Theodora collapsed into theatrical tears again. We're your family. Frederick's blood pressure is dangerously elevated. That's not my medical responsibility, I replied with clinical detachment. It never was. Those are your personal health management issues. Listen to yourself, Frederick roared, stepping aggressively closer. You're having some kind of breakdown over trivial matters. This penthouse is bought with family money. We are your family. You excluded me, I shouted back. I came to share Christmas dinner with you, and you publicly humiliated me. I funded your mortgage, your lifestyle, maintained everything, and you still treated me like hired help. Vivian, stop being so melodramatic, Theodora whispered, her voice trembling with false vulnerability. Melodramatic? I said, my tone arctic. Let me refresh your memory about my compensation, gossip behind my back, a sister-in-law who treats me like an ATM, and in-laws who manipulate me when they need financing, then vanish when I need emotional support. That's completely false, Theodora said weakly, but I could see the recognition dawning in her eyes. It's absolutely true. I retrieved my phone and accessed my voice recordings, something I'd started doing after suspicious conversations. I pressed play. Celeste's voice emerged crystal clear, just because you pay the bills doesn't mean you're one of us. Complete silence engulfed the hallway. Theodora's face drained of all color. Frederick's jaw tightened as he shot a furious glance at Celeste. I didn't intend it that way, Celeste said frantically, stepping forward. Come on, Viv, you know I was just being sarcastic. Just being truthful, I interrupted her. That's exactly what you all genuinely believe, isn't it? We do care about you, Theodora whispered through fresh tears. No, I responded flatly. You care about my financial contributions. Frederick completely lost control then. His voice became a threatening growl. Enough. You're behaving like some entitled princess. You actually think you're superior to us just because you're a successful lawyer? I don't think I'm superior, I said calmly. I simply know I deserve basic human respect. And if I can't receive that, I'll accept solitude instead. Frederick let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Abandoning your family isn't solitude. It's sociopathic. Sociopathic? I raised my voice, finally releasing years of suppressed fury. You want to discuss sociopathic behavior? Sociopathic is exploiting me financially while psychologically abusing me. Sociopathic is ridiculing me privately after I've rescued you repeatedly. Sociopathic is never once asking about my emotional well-being. Vivian, Theodora said, barely audible, we had no idea you felt this way. Because none of you ever inquired. I stepped backward and began closing the door. Now you can experience what I've endured for years, complete isolation. Wait. Theodora screamed, reaching desperately, but I shut the door firmly. I stood there, breathing deeply, barely registering her sobbing through the heavy door. For a brief moment, guilt washed over me. But then I remembered their laughter during my humiliation, the casual cruelties they thought I couldn't hear, how I was perpetually useful but never genuinely valued. I activated silent mode on my phone. I walked to my kitchen, prepared fresh coffee, and sat by the floor-to-ceiling windows. Snow was falling again, gentle, steady, and serene. It was the type of tranquility I hadn't experienced in years. They pounded on the door for 15 more minutes. I didn't budge. I didn't even acknowledge the sound. 2 hours later, the notifications resumed, more calls, more desperate messages. I ignored every single one. Didn't read them, didn't care about their content. By the following morning, I had accumulated over 90 missed calls, but I felt composed, a profound, unshakable composure. For the first time in years, I wasn't drowning. I was liberated. I awakened to silence, not the oppressive, anxiety-inducing kind, but the restorative kind. No incessant ringing, no manipulative messages, just gentle morning light filtering through my blinds. It felt like genuine peace. Days transformed into weeks. I adapted to the quietude. Initially, the silence seemed unusual, almost unnaturally empty, but with each passing day, it felt increasingly like inhaling fresh mountain air after years trapped in a suffocating basement. I practiced law without emotional interference. I prepared meals exclusively for Oliver and myself. I took evening walks through Central Park and never checked my phone. But the external world continued its rhythm. One morning while collecting mail, my neighbor Patricia mentioned quietly, "Did you know? Your in-laws lost their house." Her voice was hushed, gossipy, and slightly sympathetic. "Theodora's blaming Frederick entirely, and Celeste, she's working at a coffee shop now, apparently." I nodded acknowledgement. "Yes, I'm aware." "What actually happened?" she inquired, her eyes bright with curiosity. I didn't elaborate. I simply smiled politely and returned to my apartment. Later that evening, I discovered an old photo album tucked deep in my closet. I hadn't examined it in years. I turned through page after page, joyful faces, birthday celebrations, summer vacations. There I was, a young professional smiling confidently at the camera, before I understood what lay ahead. Then my phone chimed with a new message, "Vivian, we've lost everything. Frederick blames me completely. Celeste refuses to speak to me. Please, we were mistaken. I apologize. Come back." I stared at the screen. My finger hesitated momentarily, then I pressed delete. No rage, no guilt, just a profound, settled sense of liberation. I returned the album to the top shelf of my closet. It represented part of my history, but only a fragment. I stepped out onto my penthouse terrace with Oliver, the crisp winter air filling our lungs as we looked out over the glittering Manhattan skyline. The sky stretched endlessly above us, crystal clear and boundless, like the future that lay ahead. Oliver's small hand slipped into mine as he pointed excitedly at the twinkling lights below. "Mama, look how beautiful everything is from up here," he said, his voice filled with wonder. I smiled down at my son, my real family, my true blessing. "Yes, sweetheart. It really is beautiful when you can see clearly." For the first time in years, I felt genuinely complete, not because someone desperately needed my money, not because I was being used and manipulated, but because I had finally learned to value myself. I had discovered what real family meant: unconditional love, mutual respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Oliver looked up at me with those bright, intelligent eyes. "Are we going to be okay, Mama?" I squeezed his hand gently and smiled with absolute certainty. "We're going to be more than okay, my love. We're going to be free." The city lights sparkled like stars beneath us, and I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, as a real family should. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story of justice and family, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Your support means everything to us, and it helps us continue sharing these powerful stories of standing up for yourself and finding your true worth.